Tech English followers. How are you today? Are we doing okay? Alright. How is everything going about studying English tenses in English language? Are we doing okay on that? Okay, I hear you. That's why we are doing all these videos for you. Okay, so in this hour of our class, we are going to talk about, this time, past perfect continuous tense. Past perfect continuous tense. Are we ready to get started? Okay, come on then. Today we're gonna talk about past perfect continuous, and we're gonna show it on the timeline diagram, because as usual I always tell you that it's easier to understand how to use English tenses properly and put them in mind from the perspective of demonstration on the timeline diagram. We'll also talk about word format and usage. We'll talk about time expressions, positive, negative, and question forms. And finally, we're going to do practice. Why? Because practice is very important, as usual, I say. And as you can see this time, I change the proverb that I like the most. But this is as good as the other one I always mention, practice makes perfect. Let me read that to you. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I would suggest you to look up that proverb through internet, because it's an impressive one, and it tells us about we can get anything we want by working hard, by working diligently. I would suggest you to check that out from internet for the explanation. All right. What for is past perfect tense, past perfect continuous tense used? It is used for expressing something that started in the past and continue it until another time in the past. What does that mean? Let me repeat that to you. It is used for expressing something. Something means an action or an event that started in the past and continued until another time in the past. So I need two actions again. One action is supposed to be before the other action in the past. Okay? And we focus on the time period between these two actions or events in the past. Let's try to explain it with an example. I had been studying English for 2 years before I came to Rome. Alright, let's see it on the timeline diagram. I had been English for 2 years before I came to Rome. Okay, let's see what's going on here. We've got two actions here, and both of the actions are in the past. What are they? Action number one, had been studying English. Action number two, came to Rome action. Which one is the first? Which one is the after? Why do I want to learn that? Why do I want to know this? Because the one before another action is supposed to be in past perfect continuous tense. That's why I need to know which action of these two actions in the past is before, which action is after. How can I understand that this sentence is in past perfect continuous, had, been, verb, ing. Plus, as you can see, there's a time expression used with for. It could have been with since as well. So, time expression defines which tense we are supposed to use or we should use, plus word format is the second thing that we will understand which tense we should use if we want to express it properly. And our word format is had plus being plus verb ing. Let's combine two simple past actions with when. Jack started waiting for Carol, let's say at 7 p.m. sharp. Carol arrived at 9 p.m. to the meeting place to meet with Jack. Alright, so what are we going to do here? Let's combine these two simple past actions, why, verb 2, with when conjunction. And let's see what's going to change after when we combine it with a conjunction when. Jack had been waiting. Why? Because started waiting at 7, but had been waiting for 2 hours. This time period is 2 hours. When Carol arrived. Okay? So we combine this with when conjunction, and right now I know which action was before and which action was after. This action is before, it's got to be present perfect. But what we emphasize, try to emphasize here is the period of time that Jack had been waiting. That's why I use past perfect continuous tense here. What do we use past perfect continuous tense for? Number one, for an action started in the past and continue it up until another time in the past. That's what we were talking about. Number two, emphasize the duration of an activity in the past. We just mentioned, we're going to mention it in more detail. Number three, for a result at the time in the past. And finally, number four, we use past perfect continuous tense with time expressions such as when, before, by the time, for, since, and how long. Let's try to explain it elaborately, more detail. Okay, number one. He had been looking for the wallet for 2 hours. I'd like to attract your attention here. Full stop. It's not a combined sentence. Second sentence, it was found in the drawer of his office table. Okay, so I figured that an action started in the past and continued up until another time. Another action in the past. That's why I use here in the first sentence past perfect continuous tense. Okay, let's see number two. He had been working in that company for 10 years before he quit to work at another company. Here, actually, we are trying to emphasize how many years this gentleman had actually been working in that company. That's why I'm using here past perfect continuous to emphasize the duration. What was the duration? We mentioned before in our other videos. Duration is a period. Period. Here in this case, it's a period in the past, or continuation. In our sentence, it's a continuation in the past. So I use past perfect continuous tense to emphasize the duration or time period or continuation period in this case. Number 3, result of the time in the past. Okay, I'm walking at the street. I'm seeing the pavements are wet, but I also see that it's not raining. Let's see our example. The pavement was wet, as we can see in the image. It had been raining. Again, there are 2 sentences here. The pavement was wet, full stop. The second sentence, it had been raining. Here, what is the action and what is the result? The action is raining action. Is it completed? Yes, it's not raining anymore. But what about the result? Because of this rain, the pavements was wet. That's why first it rained and made pavements wet. After the rain stopped, and probably after the rain stopped, probably I went out and saw that the pavement was wet. That is why I use past perfect continuous tense here. And lastly, let's see the example for number 4. He had been working for 2 hours when he was interrupted because most probably his daughter was stopping him, preventing him from working any longer. Okay, so what's going on here? Here, as you can see, we combine 2 different actions with then conjunction. We could also use before, by the time, for, since, and how long, depending on the situation or depending on the action or event. Okay, let's see an example in the past perfect continuous. I had been teaching English for 2 years by the time I changed my job. Why I colored this sentence in the 2 different colors is because I'm sorry. This is the first action or more past action in red highlighted part, and the blue highlighted part comes after. And what I want to really emphasize here is for 2 years here. That's why I use past perfect continuous tense. Let me read once more as the last time. I had been teaching English for 2 years by the time I changed my job. Alright, sorry about that. He had been driving for 3 hours. He had been driving for 3 hours before he had an accident. Before he had an accident. A couple of minutes ago, I mentioned that to use past perfect or past perfect continuous, we have to know which action is the past or before, which action is after, because we have two actions in the past in hand. Why do I want to know this? Because the more past action is going to be past perfect, and if I want to emphasize or put forward strongly the period of time, right that time, at that right that time, then I would want to use past perfect continuous. He had been driving for 3 hours. That's the period of 3 hours before he had an accident. This action is simple past. This action is past perfect continuous. Let's see past perfect tense versus past perfect continuous. Past perfect tense expresses the past action already finished when another action happened. That's what we talked about. Let's see the example. I met them after they had divorced. It's all clear. What's going on here? The past action here already finished, had divorced action. Another action in the past is met them after action. Here I'd like to attract your attention. There is after here as a conjunction, which helps us to understand which action is more past than the other in the past. In past perfect continuous, on the other hand, it expresses a past action which started in the past and continued till another time in the past. Not like in past perfect, because in past perfect already finished. But here in past perfect continuous, it expresses a past action which started in the past, but continued up until another time in the past. Let's read our example. She had been working here for 2 weeks when she had the accident. So here I see had been verb ing, working, tells us that the action, working action, is still going on. In the past, of course. Okay, past perfect is also used to emphasize the result of an action or activity in the past. Example, I had been to London twice by the time I got a job in New York. On the other hand, in past perfect, past perfect continuous, it does not emphasize action as well as past perfect, but it emphasizes the duration, the time period. Alright? That's very simple and clear. Past perfect tense emphasizes the result of an action, while past perfect continuous tense emphasizes the duration of an action. Let's see the example. He needed a holiday because he had been working hard for 6 months, and 6 months is the duration in the past before another action in the past. And finally, past perfect shows two events in the past and that are linked. I couldn't take my flight because I had forgotten my boarding pass. These two actions are linked to each other, and one action comes after another here. What about the past perfect continuous? It shows the cause of a past action. cause of a past action. I've been traveling all night, so I was tired. Here, was tired is the cause here, and had been traveling all night. After hadn't been traveling all night, I was tired. So it shows the cause of the past action. There you go. Three main differences between past perfect and past perfect continuous tense. Let's see another example in the past perfect continuous. As you can see, as usual, two actions I need for past perfect or past perfect continuous. Here comes the first, here comes the second action. What is the first action? I was studying for 2 hours. Okay? David arrived. Number one is past continuous action. Number two is the past action. What if we combine these two actions, different actions in different tenses, past continuous and past tense? Let's see how we combine them in one sentence, and what difference does it happen? What things change, at least? I had been studying for 2 hours. By the time David arrived, that's what happens. When we combine two actions in the past, I need to know which one is before, which one is after. For the action which is before the other action, I need to know if I'm to emphasize the action, the result of an action, or the period of an action. Here, I'd like to emphasize, put forward the period of an action, in this case for 2 hours between these two actions in the past. 2 hours, a period, 2 hours has gone. So I would like to emphasize that. That's why I use past perfect continuous tense. And let me repeat that once more. I had been studying for 2 hours by the time David arrived. By the time David arrived. David arrived action is simple past. And I had been studying for 2 hours action is the past perfect continuous action. I can also interchange these two parts, because as you can see, by the time close in blue highlighted part and the main close is in red color, if I bring by the time close to the beginning of the sentence, then I should use comma. By the time David arrived, comma, I had been studying for 2 hours. So if I flip it around or interchange it, then that's the difference. If the conjunction clause is in the middle, no comma. If the conjunction clause is at the beginning, we should combine two actions with a comma. Another example, she had been driving around the city for 2 hours before she found the post office. Before she found the post office, she had been driving around the city for 2 hours. There you go. This tense, which tense are we talking about? Past perfect continuous tense is also used to emphasize, to give utmost importance, or to give more importance to time period than the action itself, to emphasize the duration of an action that was completed before another action in the past. Here comes an example. I had been waiting for 20 minutes when the train finally arrived. Okay? Who do you think must have said this sentence? Okay, see? The most probably, the first sentence, somebody at the train station who had been waiting for a passenger probably might have said that. I had been waiting for 20 minutes when the train finally arrived. As you can see, train finally arrives to the train station, but 20 minutes had already passed. What about the second one? We had been traveling for 2 hours when we arrived at the station. The most probably, who said this? A passenger in the train, a passenger traveling in the train said, we had been traveling for 2 hours when we arrived at the station. As you can see, we use past perfect continuous tense to emphasize the period of an action or the duration of an action. Jump, punch, shake, head. If you see all the actions that I'm doing now, then these actions are action verbs. If you do not see the actions, such as like, feel, want, that means these actions are not action verbs. Why do I want to know this? We mentioned and focused on this topic in our previous videos as well. Why do I want to know this? Because non-action verbs cannot be used in continuous tenses or continuous actions. Okay, my son hadn't been wanting ice cream before he saw ice cream in one of his friend's hand. Of course, I cannot say hadn't been wanting. I cannot use want, which is non-action verb in continuous form, as well as in past perfect continuous tense, because non-action verbs cannot be used. Instead, I should say, my son had wanted ice cream before he saw ice cream in one of his friends' hand. What are the other non-action verbs which I shouldn't use in continuous forms? Understand, need, want, remember, mean, enjoy, know, like, prefer, sing are some of the state verbs or non-action verbs. Let's see the positive form in our tense. I had been studying English before I moved to Istanbul. Because Maria had been standing all day at work, she wanted to sit down. They had been talking for over an hour before he arrived. All of these three sentences are in positive or affirmative form. Let's see the negative form. I'm just going to put not. There you go. I hadn't been studying English before you moved to Iowa. she hadn't been driving for hours before he arrived. Or I can also say she had not been driving. That's the short form. And had not been is the long form. 4 hours before he arrived. They had not been living in that house before they solved it. All these three tenses are in negative forms of past perfect continuous. And finally, the question form. What do? I just bring or pull helper verb to the beginning of the sentence. Had you been studying English before you moved to Iowa? Had you been feeling it all day because you went to bed early? These two questions are positive. There comes the negative question. Hadn't they been living in that house for 20 years before they sold it? Or I can also say, had they not been living in that house for 20 years before they sold it? These three sentences are interrogative or question forms of past perfect continuous tense. Let's see the time words, time expressions. For, since, already, after, just, never, yet, before, by the time. What about past perfect continuous? For past perfect continuous, for and since. For and since. Okay, let's do some practice. We are going to connect these two sentences with because conjunction. Okay, they called the police because, and we're going to use past perfect continuous tense as well. They called the police because someone had been watching their house. Here comes number two. We felt distant because, we're going to put because, we had been arguing a lot. Number three, everybody was afraid because the wind had been blowing very hard. And number four, Jane was very angry because she and her boyfriend have been quarreling. Full stop. Let's fill in the blanks. So far in the last 7 videos, that's our 8th video. So far we focused on 8 tenses, English tenses. This time, this practice a little hard because we're going to put the words in correct forms. We're going to put the verbs in parentheses in the correct tenses. And we're going to use either past or past continuous or past perfect or past perfect continuous. So that is a fantastic practice for us to understand the four past tenses perfectly. Let's give it a start. While, okay, as soon as I see while, remember, among these 4 tenses, after while, which tense or which action, let me say, was going to come? After while, the long action comes, past continuous. After I was walking to the city center, and what should come after? See, the verb see. So it's supposed to be a short action. I, simple past, saw an advertisement for a concert on Saturday. A lot of other people, it's going on, and before me. What does before tell me? It tells me that in a combined sentence, in 2 sentences combined, it tells me which action is before, which action is after. So because it says before me here, this, a lot of other people already see action is more past, then I should use it in past perfect. Let's try it. A lot of other people had already seen the advertisement before me. Let's keep going, keep moving. They stand, we're going to use outside the theater when also tells me which action is before, which action is after in a combined sentence. So when I arrived there, they had been standing outside the theater. Okay. Full stop. We, okay. There for a long time, full stop. We waited there for a long time. Okay, at last, a man, we're going to use come out of the theater and shows that these two tenses should be parallel, so it's going to be these two are going to be in the same tense. At last, a man came out of the theater and put up a notice. Why? Because put is an irregular verb, and all three forms are the same. Put. Verb 1, verb 2, verb 3. Present, past, and past participle forms of put are the same. Okay, let's move on. They put up a notice in the past, so I'm just wondering what's going to come after. I'm going to use sell all the tickets for Saturday. Okay, somebody just put a notice on the wall, probably saying that no more tickets for Saturday. So which action do you think is more past? Sure, they had sold the tickets. They had sold the tickets for Saturday. We blank, we're going to use wait so long that we are angry. Okay, we had waited for so long that we had been, or you can also use had waited for so long that we, simple past, felt angry. We had been waiting so long that we felt angry. Why blank they not tell us earlier? Why hadn't they told us earlier? Why hadn't they told us earlier? I know that fill in the blanks paragraph was tough for you guys, but the more practice we do, the better we are going to be. Practice makes perfect, so this kind of difficult paragraph or fill in the blanks practices are going to be useful for us to understand the English tenses better and quicker. All right. What we have talked about today, we talked about past perfect continuous. As usual, we talked about past continuous tense. We tried to show it with demonstrations on the timeline diagram. We talked about how to use this tense properly. We touched on time expressions. We use positive, negative, and question forms, and we've already practiced. Why? Because practice makes perfect. Thank you again, as usual, for listening.